Hi guys, we're here with a new video, and this video will be my top 5 most fun specs in 10.2. I have some footage while I'm talking so you can actually see what is happening on the screen whenever you are playing those specs. But again, it's a subjective list. We are talking about PvP. You can also take it for PvE as well, I guess, but it is mostly PvP, and I do believe those 5 specs are the most fun specs currently in 10.2. Of course, this is personal taste. I will also have some healers in the list because I feel like you need to have some representation for healers. So if you are like looking for a healer in 10.2, maybe those healer specs are more for you. We also have DPS specs, which are combined with melee. We have also a specialized spec and also a range spec. Let's start with my number 5. I would say that the best and most fun spec you have if you want a DPS as well as you heal, you could play Disc Priest. Disc Priest has been simplified this patch. There's a few nerfs, there's a few buffs, but overall I feel like the classes are going to have less button bloat in general. I do feel like Disc Priest is currently on its way to be a good rework for Disc Priest. Keeping the Atonement healing as a cornerstone way to heal your allies, with also some direct healing being a lot stronger. Also having ultimate penitence to actually be able to do a multitude of penances on the enemies, on the allies, especially in arenas where in 2v2 all those balls are going to be headed towards the enemy or towards your allies, which is a great thing. And just in overall damage wise, it feels way better than before. I feel like whenever you're doing a Mind Blast, having Chism already on the enemy is quite nice. Having Dark Archangel as a PvP talent, giving you the extra oomph needed to do a lot of damage. And also having your Mind Bender, for example, giving you Shadow Covenant, which in turns will turn your penance into a Shadow ability, even do more damage as well. And your Smite actually hurts a lot with the specific talents that you can go for to get Smite a lot beefier, but in general it does feel like a good thing. My 4th spec would be Assassination Rogue, and I'm going to show you really quickly the things that are going all right for Assassination Rogue. We are currently playing on the PTR. You also see some gameplay like damage proportions and how you deal damage, but there's a few things I want to talk. Again, I'm not playing the most effective build, I think, because you do want Dragon Tempered Blaze probably, but I do like to play with Kingsbane. I do play with Sudden Demise, although it's nerfed also in PvP as well, but also Arterial Precision. I do feel like those combinations are actually very fun to play. I feel like you have way more builds that you can play in PvE, but also in PvP. I think just in overall aspect, it's way more fun to play. Having internal bleeding now, having rupture, making the application of internal bleeding even more damage onto your enemies. You can have like a very dot heavy spec with like Garrote doing way more damage, having lethal dose, having maybe indiscriminate carnage where you can just AoE like dot in SOLOQ RPGs or in just RPGs in general. You can also have Kingsbane, heavy hitter, I would say, with Cold Blood, as you can see in the video. You also have Arterial Precision, again augmenting the bleed damage that you can produce with your spec. Having Mutilate finally be in the top 3, top 4 most damaging abilities in the game, which is really, really fun. Like, not the game, but I mean for the spec. You will finally see way more damage towards Ambush, towards Mutilate. Also, whenever you are like having Blindside, you don't have to bind Ambush on another keybind. Now you have Mutilate actually turning into Ambush whenever you have the proc, which is fantastic, to be honest. It does feel alright. Like, again, having your builders like do some okay damage, not like kill damage, but it's okay damage, and having your spenders actually do a lot of damage. For example, Envenom with the 4 set is insane. Like the crit that it can produce, as you can see in the video, is really, really high. And just overall, I feel like the gameplay is really well thought. I think Assassination Rogue is in a good spot, and I hope to see them even better in 10.2. Of course, they will be bound of getting like some nerfs here and there, some buffs here and there, but hopefully the vision of Assassination Rogue doesn't change. And hopefully they understand, look, we want build diversity, we want people to actually have choices to make for their builds, and also just in general feel good to have your abilities work again in cohesion with your whole class, and that's actually a good thing. Overall, Assassination Rogue is probably one of the most fun specs currently on the PTR. Now, we have also another healer on the list, which is surprising because I do have a lot of things to say about the spec, because I do feel like there is a few things going on that is not that great, but Restoration Druid is a really good spec going into 10.2. And I'm thinking about 2v2, I'm thinking also about 3v3. SOLOQ RPG will be also very fun to play as a Resto Druid. But I think the spec will shine the most at 2v2, where you can actually just cut weave and you can go in feral form and pretty much do a lot of damage and be there as a poison for the enemy team. Because again, you're a healer, but you will have some good throughput. Or you can just go for a balanced affinity spec where you're going to typhoon people and you're going to try to do damage with your Starfire, with Wrath, or with your Star Surges. And it's actually doing quite a lot of damage. But if you're not convinced, you can also turn into a 3 and basically spam Wrath while you're healing your allies with HOTS and whatever you have to do to make them survive. But you can spam Wrath and actually crits for a lot as well. And it does a lot of damage in general. It just feels alright. The only thing I'm really disappointed is still that we are very focused around Mastery, which I think is a okay stat, but it is like balanced around it. And unfortunately, I really prefer playing with Haste. The issue is Haste is not that competitive right now, at least for throughput. It's very cool for Cyclones, it's very cool to do damage with Haste, but to actually heal with Haste is not that effective right now, at least in 10.2. But overall, if you are looking for a 2v2 spec like that is going to dominate the scene, but also 3v3 and SOLOQ RPGs, and just in general PvP, I do feel like Resto Druid is in a good spot. They are very strong in 10.2. I do feel like they're going to be one of the best, or if not the best healer going into 10.2. Again, this list is more or less about most fun, but hopefully you do understand that fun goes with strength, but strength doesn't always go with fun. And I do feel like Resto Druid, even though whenever it's not going to be strong, it's still going to be a very fun spec to play going into 10.2. Now we have another spec dear to my heart. I do feel like Elemental Shaman is going to be the second most fun spec of the... I might be biased again because I am a Shaman main, and I'm also a Warrior main, and I'm also a Warlock main. But I do feel like Shaman, currently Elemental Shaman, is one of the most versatile casters in the game. They have multiple builds as well. You have multiple ways of playing. You can be a lava burst machine, or you can be like a methodical, more casting version of that lava burst machine with a lot of lightning bolts throwing onto the enemies. And it does feel like a bit of Wrath of the Lich King whenever you're doing that, but you can also be like the lava builds, pretty much spamming lava bursts onto an enemy and like see a lot of lava bursts flinging on the enemies. I do feel like the damage is very high. I do feel like the healing, the off heals are respectable enough to be called a hybrid. I do feel like you have utility. I do feel like your totems add way more depth onto the matches. You have multiple PvP talents that are actually interchangeable, like every single talent is interchangeable, which is a thing that not a lot of specs have. And I do feel like having multiple schools of spells gives you the leisure of getting kicked, but not being like hopeless, like a lot of specs have. Like for example, Affliction Warlock, whenever you're getting kicked on Shadow, it's pretty much GG's at that point, except if you're like surviving because of a heal or whatever. It's always nice, but being like strangled into one school is very annoying as a caster. But Elemental Shaman has multiple schools. Again, it's the master of the elements, so it is normal to have that. But I do feel like a lot of casters do need something extra to not get strangled every time you're going to get an interrupt on them. But that is my take. I do feel like Elemental Shaman is very strong, and I look forward to playing one in 10.2. My last spec I want to discuss is Arms Warrior, and there's not a lot to discuss. You know, I am an Arms Warrior main in general. My channel is based around Warrior in general. Whenever I'm putting a Warrior video, it works generally well. But not only that, I do feel like they finally changed and they fixed a few things that were very annoying. Like, for example, Skill Splitter is now effectively way better than before, having your dots being sped up, but like not depleted on the enemy, so you can actually reapply rend and it still is going to take multiple times way faster. I feel like there is also multiple builds possible as an Arms Warrior. You can basically play full mastery, or you can play full haste, or you can play full crit even still, although crit has been nerfed. It's still a way you can play the game. You can also play like a big versatility monster where you can have 40% more versatility, which is in turn going to make you more tanky but also doing more damage. But in general, my preferred way to play the game would be with haste, because I do like having GCDs being lightning fast, having dots doing some okay damage. And there's also a way where you can play full mastery and have like multitude of crits going onto the enemy. It's not going to crit often, but whenever it does a lot of damage. It can do like 250k MS, you can do a 300k MS on PTR. Again, depending on like buffs you get and like situations, you can really crit very high because of the mastery build. And crit is also very nice because, again, seeing a lot of crits on the enemy is something very pleasing for the eye. I think Warrior is the epitome of a melee spec where you are going to have multitude of comps being able to be played. You can play with a caster, you can play with a melee, double melee, you can play twos with a healer. Of course, you can play twos with a hybrid, depending on the hybrid you're playing. I think you are the melee that is probably the most requested to team with, and also you have multitude comps available to you that are really, really cool. I think in SOLOQ, RBGs at least, you don't have a lot of agency on the map because you are not very mobile on the map first and foremost, but you also are not really a solo carry in a sense where you cannot really disintegrate two guys onto you without a healer, right? But I think overall, if you're thinking about twos, you're thinking about threes, you're thinking about soul shuffle, solo Q RPGs, I do feel like Arms Warrior is the most complete melee onto the game. There's a lot of honorable mentions, for example, Retribution Paladin. I think it's a very good, strong spec that is not getting nerfed in 10.2. I think the force set, I was thinking it was very bad, but actually it adds some damage. It's adding like 5 to 10% of damage overall onto a fight, which is going to be pretty noticeable. I think you can also see Feral Druids as a high contender, as a great melee that is getting buffed every single patch. You have also Balanced Druid getting changes towards a good direction. Hopefully they keep on doing changes towards that spec to make them feel very, very much better. I think Enhancement Shaman has some complexity. I think overall, specs in 10.2 do feel better. There is a few specs where I feel like they lack something, or they need a rework. For example, Frost DKs, for example, Fury Warriors. But overall, I think currently is the best time to play World of Warcraft. So hopefully I do see you on 10.2 playing some solo RPGs or solo shuffle or twos or threes. But if you want to check my latest previews, you can check one of these videos where you can preview BM Hunter, maybe a mage, maybe a warrior. Depending on what you want to see, you will see it on your screen.